Most people assume that to attract a woman, you have to constantly pursue her, be emotionally available at all times, and never create any space that make her feel uncertain. But that assumption is precisely what kills desire. Let's get one thing straight. Women are not repelled by men who detach. In fact, quite the opposite is true. Women are drawn to men who know how to detach, not out of disinterest, but out of self-respect. Detachment, when it's real and grounded, signals something powerful. It says, I have a life that's full and meaningful, with or without you. This kind of man isn't cold or distant. He doesn't play games. He doesn't disappear to manipulate a reaction. No, he simply doesn't beg for connection. He doesn't cling. He doesn't panic when she pulls away or goes quiet, because he knows who he is in the silence. That's the kind of detachment we're talking about. The kind that invites a woman to lean in, not because he pushed her, because he created enough space for her to feel her own desire rising. You see, there's something fascinating about a man who isn't trying too hard. There's a quiet confidence in the way he holds his space. He's not aloof, but he's not needy either. And that's where the magnetic tension lies. Because when a man stands in that stillness, when he's not constantly reaching, chasing, or anxiously performing, he becomes a mirror for something deeper in the feminine psyche. He represents stability, mystery, even a touch of the unknown. And let's be honest, mystery is what keeps attraction alive. Now this might feel counterintuitive, especially in a culture that tells men to be more emotionally available, more expressive, more communicative. And yes, emotional openness matters, but only when it's rooted in self-possession. When it's compulsive or performative, it comes off as insecurity. And insecurity, no matter how it's dressed up, repels desire. Because here's the truth most men don't want to harg. Women don't fall in love with your emotional oversharing. They fall in love with your emotional integrity. And part of that integrity is knowing when to pull back, knowing when to let the silence speak, knowing when to be still rather than be reactive. Esther Perel talks about how desire needs space. Love seeks closeness, yes, love wants connection. But desire dances with distance, lives in the gap between, I know you, and I'm still discovering you. And when a man detaches, not to punish or manipulate, because he's rooted in his own life, he keeps that space alive. He becomes unpredictable in the best way. Not chaotic or unstable, but complex. And complexity is what keeps a woman coming back. Not because she's confused, but because she's intrigued. This is where most men go wrong. Confuse detachment with apathy. But real detachment isn't about indifference. It's about internal anchoring. It's the kind of energy that says, I don't need to prove my worth. I don't need to overperform. I can just be. And that being, that relaxed but intentional presence, is what women find so irresistible. It's the difference between a man who's waiting to be chosen and a man who knows he's already chosen himself. Let me give you a real-world picture. Imagine a man who texts you good morning every day without fail, sends flowers regularly, constantly checks in, over-explains his feelings, and always asks where he stands. Now, compare that to a man who disappears for 2 days, not because he's playing hard to get, but because he's living a full life. He's building something. He's investing in himself. And when he returns, he's present, intentional, and grounded. You feel his attention. But you also feel that it's not desperate. That second man, he'll captivate her every time. Because his detachment isn't rejection. It's restraint. It's self-awareness. It's knowing that attention only holds value when it's not given compulsively. When a man pulls back from the constant need to fill silence, fill time, fill space, he becomes more than just available. He becomes valuable. People don't chase what's easy. They value what's rare. Now I want to be clear. I'm not telling you to ghost women. I'm not saying to withhold love or be emotionally unavailable. That's not strength. That's fear wearing a mask. What I am saying is this: stop seeking her attention as a measure of your worth. Start cultivating a life that makes you proud, with or without her applause, because that's what women are drawn to. Not the man who centers her, but the man who centers himself. And when she senses that your world won't collapse if she leaves, that's when she stays. Because ironically, women feel safe not with the man who clings, with the man who can let go. Not because he doesn't care, but because he knows that real connection only happens when both people are choosing it freely out of emotional dependency. So if you really want to be the man she can't resist, stop over-investing in her every move. Stop obsessing over how she feels. Instead, deepen your own inner world. Build something. Explore something. Develop an edge. Have a purpose that doesn't revolve around her. Because when she sees that your life has its own rhythm, its own fire, she'll want to be part of that symphony. Not because you needed her to join, because the music was already beautiful without her. Let's talk about something most men feel but rarely understand: the aching need to be seen, validated, and held. It's human. We all crave connection. But when that craving slips into emotional dependency, when a man starts outsourcing his self-worth to a woman's reaction, her tone, or her level of attention, he unknowingly begins to destroy the very attraction he hopes to build. Here's what a lot of men don't realize. Emotional neediness doesn't feel romantic to a woman. It doesn't translate as love or passion. It feels like pressure, feels like weight, and slowly it suffocates the natural flow of desire. You see, when a man loses his emotional boundaries, when he starts over-explaining his feelings, constantly seeking reassurance, or needing to be emotionally rescued, he turns the relationship into a rescue mission. And that's not what women are drawn to, not in the long run. Because attraction isn't about saving someone. It's about being magnetized by their presence, their self-possession, their composure under pressure. Esther Perel makes a powerful distinction. Love is about closeness, but desire needs distance, and emotional neediness collapses that distance. It invades it. It fills every gap, every moment of uncertainty, every pause that could have held intrigue. When a man's emotional world becomes a flood, she's not swimming in intimacy. She's drowning in his need, and no woman wants to parent the man she's supposed to be drawn to. This doesn't mean men should become stoic statues or emotionally numb. Not at all. Emotional depth is incredibly attractive when it's anchored in self-awareness, not self-abandonment. There's a world of difference between a man who can say, "This is what I feel, and I'm holding it with strength," and a man who says, "This is what I feel, and I need you to fix it so I can feel okay." One exudes strength, the other leaks need. And here's the ironic part. The more emotionally dependent a man becomes, the more he erodes the very emotional connection he's so desperate to protect. Because women don't want to be the sole keeper of your peace. They want to join you in your peace, not create it for you. When you're constantly leaning on her to feel secure, it doesn't make her feel closer. It makes her feel responsible. And emotional responsibility over time becomes emotional burden. Women are incredibly intuitive. They can feel when a man is grounded. And they can feel when he's drifting into her emotional space, hoping she'll anchor him. That's when attraction starts to fade. That's when she starts to pull away. And that pulling away often confuses the man even more, causing him to chase harder, overshare more, confess more feelings, cry out for closeness, thinking he's fighting for love, when really, he's just tightening the grip around something that needs room to breathe. What keeps a woman engaged, what makes her feel alive in your presence, is the sense that you're okay even when she isn't. That you can hold your own emotional complexity without making it her job to solve. You can remain open without becoming unstable. There's something deeply masculine about restraint. Not in the sense of avoidance, in the sense of not needing to expose everything all at once in order to be seen. The man who shares selectively, intentionally, and with emotional clarity, he creates space for her to respond. He invites her into the moment, rather than dragging her into his emotional spiral. This is where true erotic tension lies. Not in chaos, not in drama, but in polarity. In contrast. And that contrast dies when a man becomes too emotionally entangled, too available, too predictable in his expression. He becomes less of a mystery and more of an emotional project. And attraction doesn't grow in emotional caretaking, grows in the space where both people are choosing each other from a place of abundance, not emptiness. Think of it this way. If your emotional expression is a performance designed to make her stay, it's manipulation dressed as vulnerability. True vulnerability isn't about using your feelings to control someone's response. It's about revealing them without fear of abandonment. That's power. That's the kind of vulnerability that earns respect, not pity. It doesn't demand closeness. It invites it. And let's be honest, women want to feel chosen, needed. They want to feel wanted, not depended on. When a man places all his emotional eggs in her basket, she no longer feels the freedom to show up fully herself. She starts to shrink, because the weight of holding his identity becomes too much. What started as romance becomes emotional enmeshment. What kills a relationship faster than anything? Emotional fusion. When there's no air, no space, no contrast, there's no desire. So the challenge for any man listening is this: learn to hold your emotions with grace. Not suppress them, hold them. Feel them deeply, don't leak them compulsively. Let her feel that you have a container, that you can carry your own heart without dropping it into her hands. Because when she sees that strength, she's not just impressed, she's drawn to it. In the end, emotional neediness is not love. It's fear masquerading as closeness. And no matter how well-intentioned it is, fear never fosters desire. What does? A man who can feel fully and still stand firm, who doesn't demand closeness, attracts it, who speaks not from desperation, but from depth. Let's take this deeper now, because real attraction, the kind that sustains itself beyond the surface level games and chemistry, requires something that most men today have never been taught: emotional boundaries. Not walls, not coldness, not emotional avoidance. Boundaries, the internal edges that say, this is where I end, and this is where you begin. A man who possesses true masculine presence is not defined by how loudly he speaks or how dominant he acts. That's bravado, noise. Masculine presence is still, it's quiet, it's rooted, and it's impossible to fake. You can sense it in a man who walks into a room and doesn't need to perform, who doesn't need to impress, who holds himself with calm clarity simply because he knows who he is, and more importantly, who he is not willing to become in order to be loved. When a man lacks emotional boundaries, he becomes reactive. He lets a woman's mood dictate his state. He adjusts who he is based on how she feels about him in the moment. If she pulls back, he panics. If she's cold, he overcompensates. If she questions his value, he starts to shrink, hoping more available, more transparent, or more agreeable will bring her back. But here's the paradox. Women aren't drawn to men who morph to meet their moods. They're drawn to men who stay solid in the storm, who can witness a woman's chaos, her complexity, even her emotional withdrawal, and not make it about his identity. That's the difference between emotional fusion and emotional presence. One drowns in her feelings, the other stands beside them with strength. And let's be clear, this isn't about stoicism or detachment as a form of punishment. This isn't about ghosting or refusing to communicate. It's about showing up as a man who knows where he ends, who doesn't bleed into her emotional terrain, who doesn't take everything personally or try to fix her every discomfort. Esther Perel often speaks about how polarity, that dance between closeness and separateness, is what keeps passion alive. If there's no edge between two people, if there's no differentiation, no container for individuality, then intimacy collapses into sameness. And sameness may feel safe, but it doesn't feel sexy. Passion dies in emotional sameness. What keeps a woman drawn to a man is not just how much he feels, but how well he holds those feelings without spilling them everywhere, without demanding she carry them for him. Think about it. How can you be fully present with someone if you have no boundary between where your emotions end and hers begin? That's not connection. That's enmeshment. And enmeshment, no matter how poetic we try to make it sound, is just emotional confusion. It's what happens when a man believes that being intimate means having no separation, no individual center, no grounded autonomy. Real intimacy only happens when two whole people meet, not when one person is orbiting the other, trying to merge identities. And women feel that. They may not be able to articulate it in words, but they feel the difference between a man who wants to share space and a man who wants to merge to survive. First creates attraction. The second creates exhaustion. So what does masculine emotional boundaries look like in real life? It looks like a man who can witness her pain without trying to fix it. A man who can stay present without losing himself. A man who doesn't react to every fluctuation in her mood as if it's a referendum on his worth. He listens. He sees. But he doesn't collapse. He also doesn't overexpose. He doesn't feel the need to unravel every emotion the second it arises. He processes. He reflects. He shares. Not to be saved, to be known. And there's a huge difference. One is a cry for validation. The other is an offering of truth. This is why detachment, when grounded in boundary, becomes so attractive. It tells Herg, I'm not afraid of your fire. I won't lose myself trying to put it out either. It's this balance of empathy and edge that women crave, but rarely find. A man who can lean in without disappearing into her emotional space. A man who can stay solid even when things get messy. Because real relationships are messy. Attraction fades when a man falls apart every time tension arises. What makes him compelling is not his perfection. It's his containment. It's his ability to hold difficult emotions, his and hers, without breaking. And this doesn't just make a man attractive. It makes him trustworthy. Because when a woman knows that you won't emotionally collapse under pressure, she feels safe to express more, reveal more, surrender more. Your boundaries become the structure within which her feminine energy can relax and expand. And that's where real intimacy begins. Not in emotional chaos, in emotional containment. So if you want to be the man she respects, admires, and desires, ask yourself, where are my boundaries? Do I stay centered when she pulls away? Do I know how to say no when something doesn't align with my truth? Do I share emotions from a place of strength or from a place of fear? Because the answers to those questions will define the energy you bring into every connection you create. When you know where you stand, when you trust your own edges, you stop seeking approval in every interaction. You stop needing her to validate your worth. And that shift is what changes everything. That's what transforms you from a man who wants to be chosen into a man who naturally is. Let's bring it all full circle now. Because after we've talked about healthy detachment, emotional neediness, and the power of masculine boundaries, we arrive at one final truth. Perhaps the most misunderstood of them all: you do not attract women by seeking them. You attract women by seeking purpose. It's the fourth key. The subtle but radical shift from pursuing her to pursuing your path. From orbiting her world to anchoring yourself in your own. And here's what makes this difficult. Most men are raised with the belief that women are the prize. That love is the ultimate achievement. When you find the one, everything else will fall into place. So naturally, when a woman shows up and offers connection, affection, maybe even intimacy, a man starts to abandon the very life that made him magnetic in the first place. He shifts his focus away from his mission and toward her moods, away from his discipline and into her desires. And before he realizes it, he's no longer building. He's orbiting. And women feel that shift. The same man who once captivated her through his direction, his grounded focus, his subtle sense of, I have somewhere to be, now loses his edge, not because he stopped caring, but because he started caring too much about the wrong thing. He stopped leading himself and started reacting to her. And that's when the polarity begins to fade. That's when she starts pulling away. Not because she doesn't love him, because she no longer feels the current of direction that once drew her in. Esther Perel says, fire needs air. Desire needs separation. That's true in the physical sense, but it's also true philosophically. A woman doesn't just want to be loved. She wants to be inspired. And inspiration doesn't come from proximity. It comes from purpose. From watching a man do something, build something, become something. She wants to know that his life has a center. And that center isn't her. It's something greater. Something that burns inside him whether she's watching or not. This isn't about ignoring her. It's not about becoming emotionally unavailable or withholding love. It's about priority. It's about energy. It's about what you worship. Because whatever you worship will rule you. And when a man worships a woman more than he worships his own purpose, he makes her his god. That's not love. It's idolatry. And no woman, no matter how beautiful or nurturing or emotionally evolved, wants to carry that weight, kind of attention that smothers her spirit, that suffocates desire, that drains the mystery from the relationship and replaces it with emotional dependence. A man who is deeply connected to his purpose doesn't need to detach as a strategy. He's already detached by design. His life is moving. His energy has direction. His days are marked by focus. And that's what creates magnetism. Because the moment a man is willing to walk away, not because he's heartless, because he refuses to betray his path, is the moment a woman sees his value not just as a partner, but as a force. Let's be honest. Many women don't lose interest in men because of what they do wrong. They lose interest because of what those men stop doing right. The man who used to challenge her, surprise her, invite her into something bigger, slowly becomes predictable, available, safe in all the wrong ways. Because when he loses his hunger, he loses his gravity. And when he loses his gravity, she starts to float away, often without knowing exactly why. It's not too late. That fire can be rebuilt. And it starts with this: stop making her your mission. Make your life your mission. Build something that excites you. Pursue work that demands your discipline. Cultivate silence that sharpens your intuition. Commit to a vision that doesn't require her applause to stay alive. And when she sees that, when she feels that your soul is in motion, she'll lean in, not because you asked her to, but because movement is magnetic. This is the paradox: the less you need her to complete your world, the more she'll want to be part of it. The less you center her, the more she feels safe to trust you. Why? Because a man on purpose doesn't collapse under pressure. He doesn't ask her to carry what he hasn't resolved within himself. He doesn't look to her for constant emotional direction. He already knows where he's going. And yes, this will make you seem detached, but not cold, not distant, just unavailable to anything that threatens your mission. And that edge, that quiet refusal to bend your identity around love, is what makes you deeply, undeniably attractive. Women don't want a man who needs them. They want a man who chooses them from overflow. A man who could walk away, but doesn't. A man who has options, but still commits. A man who knows that love is not his oxygen, it's his offering. And that's what detachment really is at its highest level. Not disconnection, but devotion without dependency. So if you're wondering why she pulled away, why the spark faded, why things feel different, it's not because you weren't loving enough. It's because somewhere along the line, you stopped being lit. You forgot that your purpose is the root of your power. You traded your edge for comfort, your fire for familiarity,